Over 140,000 warriors stood arrayed in battle order on the desert fields of Raphia. The wealth of Ptolemaic Egypt against the vastness of the Seleucid Empire, two superpowers of the Hellenic world. The young kings addressed their respective armies, offering both words of encouragement as well as reminders of past glories and heroic deeds of their ancestors. Interpreters and unit commanders rode up and down the lines, repeating the words of their sovereign so that all could hear. The greatest praises were heaped upon the men of the central phalanxes, with whom both rulers had rested their strongest hope for victory. By all intents and purposes, both sides were determined to settle the Syrian question once and for all. The year is 217 BC. It has been over a century since the death of Alexander the Great. In the aftermath of his untimely passing, Alexander's fledgling empire had fractured into a number of successor kingdoms, each led by the various political factions that had made up the late monarch's court. At the head of these newly founded kingdoms were Alexander's former generals, friends, and family, collectively referred to as the Diadochi. Vying for domination of the Hellenic world, they regularly squabbled amongst each other in a series of conflicts known as the Wars of the Diadochi, which lasted for nearly half a century. Three dominant powers would ultimately emerge in the aftermath of the war. In the west, the kingdom of Macedon was ruled by the Antigonid dynasty. To the south, the Ptolemaic kingdom reigned in Egypt. And finally, to the east lay the Seleucid Empire, its vast holdings stretching from Anatolia to the Indus River. Despite its size and seemingly dominant position among the three Hellenic powers, the Seleucid Empire had long been in a state of decline since the death of its first ruler, Seleucus I, in 281 BC. Over the next half-century, the successive Seleucid monarchs that followed struggled to maintain a firm grip on the empire's eastern territories, their attention occupied by repeated wars with the Ptolemies of Egypt over ownership of the Coele-Syria region. Seleucid authority slowly began to erode in its distant territories as a result, with many of the empire's eastern provinces breaking off to form their own independent governments. To make matters worse, through a combination of Celtic incursions and a successful rebellion led by the governor of Asia Minor, resulted in the empire losing a large portion of its northernmost territories. The loss of the lucrative coastal cities in Anatolia was a significant blow to the Seleucid economy in particular, and greatly weakened the empire's position. In 222 BC, Antiochus III, at the age of 18, assumed the throne of the Seleucid Empire as its sixth ruler. Having inherited a truly disorganized state, the young and energetic monarch maneuvered to stabilize his position and revitalize his floundering nation. Among Antiochus's most pressing issues were a series of fresh revolts in the east, an encroaching Pergamon in Asia Minor, and the century-long territorial dispute with the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt over the Syrian region. Issuing a flurry of orders, Antiochus sent his cousin Antiochus to deal with Pergamon, dispatched two of his generals to put down the revolt in the east, while the monarch himself led a campaign against the Ptolemies in Egypt. The young ruler would get off to a rocky start, however, as his generals were defeated in the east, while Antiochus himself was completely repulsed in Syria. Fortunately, Seleucid prestige did not suffer a complete collapse, however, as Antiochus proved successful in his endeavors in Asia Minor, managing to drive the Pergamene army back to its former borders. In 221, Antiochus was determined to reassert Seleucid authority over the eastern provinces once and for all. Personally leading a force himself, the young monarch would go on to successfully suppress 3 revolts in the region. In seemingly typical Seleucid fashion, however, while Antiochus was away, Antiochus, who had been in command of Asia Minor, chose this opportune moment to launch a rebellion of his own, assuming the title of king in Asia Minor. However, as Antiochus's power was not established enough to threaten other nearby Seleucid territories, Antiochus did not consider him to be an immediate threat, and thus upon his return from the east, opted to renew attempts to secure Syria instead. The resulting Seleucid campaign of 219 would prove to be highly successful, owing in part to the defection of the Ptolemaic governor of Coele-Syria, Theodotus, who had become unpopular with the Egyptian court. Coincidentally, Theodotus was the same commander who had repulsed Antiochus a few years earlier in 222. After decisively defeating a Ptolemaic force at Berytus in 218, Antiochus would go on to capture the town of Philadelphia, before marching deeper into the Levant, where he found himself bogged down, besieging Damascus and Sidon. In Alexandria, the fourth pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt, Ptolemy IV Philopator, was slow to react to the invasion of his territories, neglecting to make any meaningful military preparations throughout